Peace and love to my beautiful family, to my elite enlightened ones. Mm. Popcorn, soda, a pen, and a pad is what you're going to need tonight. For my religious theologians, I thank you. I always thank you for joining tonight. This is Darius Corbin Mystery School. The Darius Corbin Mystery School, the home of the esoteric and metaphysical knowledge. Tonight's episode, tonight's presentation is going to be called Meet the Cathars, the spiritually divine early Christians. And I promise you, for anybody who calls themselves a Christian scholar, religious theologian, anybody who ever say they have the word and carry the word of God, if you have never told your congregation or you yourself have never studied the Gnostics, and you hear me say this so many videos, but I'm going to keep on banging it in your head. If you claim to be a preacher, a pastor, a bishop, even a pope, priest, whoever, and you have never came upon the teachings of the Gnostics texts or the Gnostics were the early Christians. I must say this, that the work of the early Christians do not compare at all with the Orthodox Christian and Orthodox theologians that you have been given in modern day time. You're going to learn tonight who the early Christians were. Even more, you're going to find out tonight what the modern day Christian theologians done, who they killed, murdered to get to where they are now, and how the spiritual truth, listen, because y'all ain't been listening, on how the spiritual truth, the spiritual essence of who you truly are has been hidden from you for all these many years. And since a lot of us don't like reading and don't really bother with certain religious stuff if it's not what the Bible have taught you or the Quran has taught you, then we skip out on our blessings. But for my Christians, I'm going to say this before I get started. And to my Islamic family, I'm going to say this before I get started. To my Christians, if you call yourself Christians and you have never studied the Gnostics, Gnostic, the Gnostics, and to my Islam family, if you call yourself Islam and never at least studied or read upon the work of the Sufis and Sufism, S-U-F-I, Sufi, S-U-F-I-S-M, Sufism, then you're missing out on a lot of great spiritual work, is what I'm saying, and a spiritual essence of who you are. But I don't want to hold too much time. I want to get right to it. Family, this is Darius Corbin Presents Meet the Cathars, the spiritually divine early Christians. And before I go, I want to give you a rewind, then it's going to fast forward into the story. So this whole thing is going to play out like a beautiful movie. The drama, the trauma, and the action, starting now. During the period, the Gnostics were very secretive and were content to worship out of the sight of the ever-growing and powerful church. Yet suppression of the masses was what eventually led to Gnosticism regaining some affluence. Life was so harsh and religion so strict that the general public started looking elsewhere for spiritual sustenance, which many people found in Gnostic sects. At this time, nobles were continually warring with each other. While they mained their armies with knights mounted upon steeds, they used the poor as foot soldiers and cannon fodder. The church was embroiled in all of this as well, making alliances with the most powerful of the nobles and lending money to others to finance their battles in return for land, autonomy, and power. Consequently, many kings became mere lackeys for the church and had to do whatever it told them. Y'all hearing this? Other members of the elite became disenchanted with Catholicism, power, and started giving sanctuary to Gnostic sects, especially in the south of France. Protected by local nobles, these Gnostics began to gain influence as they sought favor with the general populace. Perhaps the most influential group at this time was the Cathars. And I'm going to close this door, a little wind is coming through. Was the Cathars. Y'all got your pens and pads ready? Because if you call yourself a Christian and you are watching this and you're watching with ego, why? I'm not here to prove you wrong. I'm here to prove your religion right. But in order for me to prove your religion right, you need the right text and you need the right stuff. And you haven't been given the right stuff going to these churches. It's just been mind programming, mind programming, mind programming. Now I'm giving you the history of that. So let's go. They became, perhaps the most influential group at this time was the Cathars. And that is spelled Cathars. A Gnostic Christian sect that was truly pious. And I want you to write down this word as well. Pious. Pious. I do believe it's like, it means noble in a sense, but it's in all the ancient texts and whatnot, that word pious is very used. So a Gnostic Christian sect that was truly pious and dedicated to poverty. They became so popular in the south of France that they actually threatened the Catholic Church hold on that area at the time. Now here we go. Let's meet the Cathars. Y'all all right out there? I told you, you're going to get this work. You're not going to get this in your churches, but you're going to get it on my channel. Let's go. The Cathars are certainly an enigmatic bunch, seeming to weave in and out of the path of the Knights Templar and other groups. And if we got time, we're going to go into who truly the Knights of Templar really were. But let's keep on going. They are even difficult to research because most of what we know about them comes from the writings of their enemies. I don't think this is because of historians' neglect, but rather by the Cathars' design. I agree with my spirit guide Francine, and once again, before I even start, we are once again going back off the work of the beautiful late great Sylvia Brown, her book Secret Societies. Now, when she talks about Francine, once again, she is talking about her spiritual guide, no different than the Hicks character that you see on YouTube sometime with the spiritual channeling. That is a real thing. But let's keep on going on. According to historians, the group adopted its name around the middle of the 12th century, and the word Cathar is thought to have originated from the Greek term for pure ones. This set seems to have its roots in Druids, alchemists, mystics, and early Gnostics. In fact, scholars believe that it evolved from the Gnostic teachings of Western Europe, and possibly had ties to Manichaeism. Now, you're going to have to write this one down too. Manichaeism. And if I'm pronouncing it wrong, it is what it is. Google's your best friend. But Manichaeanism. Manichaeism. And that is based off the religion of the prophet Mani, who was around even before the times of Islam came and became really big for what it was. So let's continue on. The Cathars were known as the Albigenses, and that's spelled Albigensians. The Cathars were also known as the Albigenes, supposedly because of the chronicler Geoffrey du Brella of Vigios in 1181. He referred to the town of Albi in southern France as being the area they came from. As I explained in the last chapter, the south of France has been a source of myths about Jesus and his family for centuries. Now, if these stories aren't true, why would they continue to have such strength? It is also interesting that many Knights Templars lived in this area. Southern France has certainly been a hotbed of Gnostic activity. Southern France has certainly been a hotbed of Gnostic activity. Of course, at the point, the area wasn't yet a part of France, but instead what's now known as Spain. You must remember that it was a time of kingdoms, fiefdoms, and duchies that were scattered all over Europe. In other words, countries' boundaries weren't like today, clear-cut borders. Like the Knights Templar, the Cathars have a legend in their history that claims they were the keepers of a fabulous treasure. Some say it was none other than the Holy Grail, while others believe it was the ancient scrolls of knowledge. But if those who watched my video I did on God and the connection to nanotechnology, you see that the Cathars were even mentioned in that video. And if you watch that video, you find out what the technology they had was. So let's continue going on. And yet another group maintained that it was a sacramental sword in a carved wooden box. Whatever the treasure was, it was supposedly taken by 4 Catholic monks out of their castle of Montserg, and that's Montsgur, just a day or so before the stronghold fell during the Albigenese Crusade. The monks then slipped through the armies of the Catholics and escaped to some hidden place, never to be heard from again. Francine, which is Sylvia Brown's spiritual guide, confirmed that the treasure was indeed taken out of Montserg just before its fall, and that it consisted of sacred teachings including information about the bloodline of Christ and his life in France after the crucifixion. There were no jewels or the like because the Cathars didn't ascribe value to worldly goods other than for sustenance or to help the poor. The non-violent Cathars made many friends and converts since the harsh life of medieval times and the constant political squabbles between nobles had made things very tough for the lower classes. Throw in the Catholic Church, which wanted to control everything spiritually and rule with their iron fists, and you have a fallow field that was ready to be planted with a new crop of ideas. When the Cathars migrated into what is now southern France, in the Languedoc region, and that's spelled Languedoc, they probably had no idea how successful they would be. They entered this environment and found a willing audience for their new ways of doing things. They brought with them a type of freedom and solace that hadn't been seen for as long as the poor masses could remember. Finally, someone was attending to people's need without asking in return no tithes or indulgence. There was no taking up of arms to fight some stupid war, and no working from dawn to dusk to help feed an army that was out who knows where. The Cathars theologian of perfecti, and that's spelled Perfecti, were also known as Bons Hamis, Bons Fimis. That's Bons Hamis, Bons Fimis. Bons Hamis is Bonshomes, and Bons Fimis is Bonnnesfemmes, or Bons Charentines, or that's Chretiens. And I'm going to stop there. And if you're watching this video and you're not taking notes, and you're just watching this with an egotistic or selfish mentality, then why are you watching? If you're watching taking notes, you're learning. You're learning more than what your pastors and preachers told you. You can now research this and learn about the early Christians and learn about your true work. Because in a few, I'm going to really give you what they really believed in. And these are still your early Christians. And it's going to contradict what you learned in church. So pay attention. And what do those words mean? They mean good men. Bons Hamis means good men. Bons Femis means good woman. And Bons Christians means good Christians. Their followers were named Credents, and that's Credentes. And if the grass cutter get too loud, I know how to talk louder. And were purposely not initiated into the doctrine at all. Instead, if they agreed to receive what was called the consolamentum and that's CONSOLAMENTUM, the baptism of the Spirit, before their death, they will be freed from all moral prohibition and religious obligations. The Cathars impressed people with their teachings. Their acceptance of life with all its faults and fertilities prevented them from condemning anyone. Consequently, no moral prohibitions or rules were ever put forth, as the church had done. Interestingly, this had a profound effect on the masses. Instead of running around and partying all the time, they became gentler, kinder, and more helpful. They became gentler, kinder, and more helpful to their friends and neighbors. It was almost psychological trickery in that they could raise hell if they wanted to with no punishment. So it wasn't fun to break the rules anymore. While many loved to challenge Catholic dogma as a rebellious act, the Cathars had no such restrictions and were so kind that many soon found that they were nothing to rally against. The Gnostic group was kind and peace-loving and attended to the poor by providing them with an education, setting up hospice, and that's hospices, and that's HOSPICES, and otherwise taking care of them. Cathars lived frugally, had no strict rules, held services in the open forests and fields, and seemed to generally care about people. In addition, women were put on an even plane with men. For my sisters watching, did y'all hear that? In addition, women were put on an even plane with men. And I'm going to say this right quick because this is my channel. I'm going to say it. Me Too, LGBTQ, even Black Lives Matter. But we're going to focus on the first two I said. Everybody is getting sprayed if they say anything wrong about these two main groups that I just said, the Me Too or the LGBTQ organizations. But my question to y'all, as a masculine man, as a God consciousness, Christ consciousness, as the son of the Mother God, how come y'all don't take that same energy and go at religion, Orthodox religion? For example, the early Christians, you just hear me say this, the Gnostics that were murdered and killed by the ones who control Christianity now. What they were doing were, in addition, women were put on an even plane. Now, for the ones that call themselves Christians and religious people, you know that in your Christian Bibles, especially the original Hebrew Bible, it said that when it came to the woman's menstrual cycle, that she was unclean and needed to be cleansed of her illness or her issue, that the woman needed to be clean of her issue and confined until cleansed of her issue. We know that in Christian religion, the modern day Christian religion, they don't even really consider a woman able enough to preach the word of God. So these two things that are in the Bible, that the woman is, when a woman's going through a menstrual cycle, she is unclean and need to be silent somewhere and confined until she is cleansed of her issue. And that you cannot, wouldn't even worthy to preach the word of God. But yet, our sisters, our ladies are the main one that rally behind this demiurge in the Bible. And give all your energy to this demiurge that's in the Bible, Yahweh. He's not a supreme father. He's not a true supreme creator. But if you read the Gnostics, you would know that. So how do you think people like me who are the God Christness or the Christ consciousness or myself, the son of the mother God, feel when our people, we got to come into this world and realize that our people are still trapped into this religion that trapped the same ancestors hundreds of years ago. We still haven't learned nothing because we don't want to read. I'm telling you to read the Gnostic, the Nag Hammadi scriptures. so you can get the truth. Let's go back in. In addition, women were put on an even plane with men, and priests gave spiritual counseling and performed services in homes if necessary. In contrast, the bishops representing the Catholic Church were corrupt. Hypocrites charged money for sacraments, seemed aloof and uncaring, and demanded the strict observation of a multitude of harsh rules. Please don't play with me. Not in this age of Aquarius. I'm not the one. The 20 and 4 elders, I am a part of that. The 20 and 4 elders y'all talked about in y'all Bibles, I am a part of that celestial being. Not with me. You won't win, I promise you. I don't do debates. I'm here to wake my people up. I don't do debate for what? Research, learn. That's the problem now. Everybody want to go against each other. I'm trying to wake people up who want to be woken up. It's time. What's wrong with y'all people out there? Wake up. And I'm going to read that part again. Because y'all still pay tithes. Y'all still feel like your whole life is based on your churches and your pastors and whatnot. When, even in your Bible, even though it's filled with tainted lies and whatnot, the truth is still in the Bible. It's the biggest spell book ever. Because it got you convinced. The temple is within. Ye are gods. You too shall do greater things. What happened to that? Y'all forgot about that, huh? I got time today. Let's go. In contrast, that means against what the Catholic Church was going through. But in contrast to what the Cathars were going through. This is what the bishops were doing even back then. In contrast, the bishops representing the Catholic Church were corrupt hypocrites, charged money for sacraments, seemed aloof and uncaring, and demanded the strict observation of a multitude of harsh rules. It's no wonder that the Catholics established a firm foothold in Languedoc, so much so that Catholic cathedrals were frequent less and less. Listen, this is the cause of the murders of our ancestors. So much so that Catholic cathedrals were frequented less and less. The Catholics were giving people the true spiritual essence without charging them, giving them God without having to go to a church, showing them their true spiritual divineness. So what do you need a church for? These people say, why do I need church? And they're giving me my true essence, my true bliss, my true abode of God. So the Catholic Church was being frequented less and less. Two more smart ones. I guess we know what happens next, huh? I told you so. I'm play it like a movie. Stay tuned. Let's go. Yeah, I'm going to get upset because you should too if you're a Christian. And I'm a religious scholar. I claim no religion. I know all of them. And I have studied and researched all of them. I grew up as a Christian. So yes, I'm going to be upset. But even Jesus Christ said, and the Gnostics in the Gospel of Thomas, once you discovered, you will be appalled, you will be shocked, you will be disturbed, is what he said. But out of that disturbance, rejoice, because now you know that you are over the all. And that was paraphrasing. Let's keep on going, man. Thus, the church deemed the Cathars to be heretics. Heretics. You need to write down that word, because when people talk about these papal bulls, and these are like these restrictions that were put on ancient books. These books could not see the light of day in the Bible. Doesn't mean these books weren't true. It means that these Catholic churches did not want these books to come in there because it would kind of have you question all the other stuff that was put in the Bible. So they would call this stuff heretics or heretical. Doesn't mean it was false. It means they didn't want you to know about it in the Bible. Let's keep on going. Regardless, thus the church deemed the Catholics to be heretics, regardless of the fact that their followers were receiving much needed solace and help. The reigning religious authorities had always dealt vigorously with those whom they considered to be heretical. Let me say that again. I hope you're listening out there. It's only been 24 minutes. I promise you it's finna get better. The reigning religious authorities had always dealt vigorously with those whom they considered to be heretical, which heretofore had been composed of small groups who weren't considered to be any real problem. The Cathars, however, were a different matter. By converting Catholics and thus lowering the church revenue in the area, these Gnostics were becoming a real threat. And as usual, the church had a response. But before we get into that, family, let's first explore the beliefs of the Cathars in greater depth to find out why the populace was so attracted to them. How many of y'all still watching right now? I thank y'all. Call up your preachers, call up your pastors. This is real shit. This is not entertainment. This is real shit. This is not entertainment. Because I'm about to go in. Brace yourself. Because I was just squeezing the juice out of the lemon. Now, your thirst is about to get quenched. Let me read that again. By converting Catholics and thus lowering the church revenue in the area, these Gnostics were becoming a real threat, and as usual, family, the church had a response. But before we get into that, let's first explore the beliefs of the Cathars in greater depth to find out why the populace was so attracted to them. Are Christians, all right? If you don't leave here, and if you don't research this and challenge yourself or challenge your pastor, don't go on YouTube. What the hell I say YouTube? Don't go on Facebook, Instagram, and all those talking about how much you love God, God this, God that, God gang. Because if you really know which God you was representing, my gosh. The Cathars believed, this is about to get good, family. God, boy, I'm telling you, it's finna get good. The Cathars believed that within every person existed a divine light. How many of y'all seen, by show of hands, don't worry, I can see y'all. How many of y'all seen Transformers? Remember when they were talking about the divine spark? The Cathars believed that within every person existed a divine light or spirit, most commonly known today as the soul, which was trapped in a world of temptation and corruption. Now, mind you, because I gotta repeat myself because some people don't listen. They don't want to listen. These were the early Christians. You call yourself a Christian? You rep that God gang? Okay, then how are you not gonna know who God is if you don't? In order to know where you're going, you gotta know where you've been gone. In order to know where you've been going, you gotta know where you've been. I'm giving you to where you've been. And it's not going to be comfortable because it doesn't fit with what you think is truth. But anyway, here we go. The Cathars believed that within every person existed a divine light or spirit, most commonly known today as the soul, which was trapped in a world of temptation. Listen. Which was trapped in the world of temptation and corruption. As Gnostics, they believe in dualism, or that this world was created by a lesser deity who proclaimed himself to be the one and only creator, much like Satan. As Gnostics, they believed in dualism, or that this world was created by a lesser deity who proclaimed himself to be the one and only creator, much like Satan himself to be the one and only creator. The Catholics then put forth that Orthodox Christianity also believed in a false God. Let me read that again because I don't want you guys to think I'm putting two words together. As Gnostics, they believed in dualism, or that this world was created by a lesser deity. And I also want to get through your head. They believed in dualism, or that this world was created by a lesser deity who proclaimed himself to be one to be the one and only creator, much like Satan. The Cathars then put forth that the Orthodox Christianity, that means Orthodox Christianity is y'all and what you believe in. They put forth that Orthodox Christianity also believed in a false God, and that the Catholic Church was a corrupt abomination that was deeply influenced by the prison of earthly life materialism. Spirit, the vital essence of humanity, was therefore trapped in a negative physical realm that was created by a false God and ruled over by his demoralized minions. To free yourself from this jail of the human condition, the Cathars believed you had to be first become aware of the evil and depravity that existed in the reality of human life. Don't get scared. Please don't get scared. Which included the ecclesial, dogmatic, and social structures of that time. Once you were cognizant of the prison of matter, and I quote, and its corruption, then you could set about breaking its bond, which was a step-by-step progression that was different for each individual, becoming kinder, gentler, and more spiritual. I do not have time to be playing with y'all people. I need you to wake up. Did you hear what I just said? I gotta do it again. The Cathars, who are the early Christians, the OGs, the ones they never told you about in church or never told you all about in church. What they believed, and if you call yourself a Christian, Christian, you need to research so you can have these same beliefs, because I know you guys are feeling like this. You want to know why you go to church and it's not matching up with what he's saying. That's because what they're saying is bullshit. This is what's going on right here. This is your truth. And I'm going to read it again until you say, man, I get it. I'm tired. Keep going. But I don't think you there yet. I think you still want to think this is entertainment. And like I'm doing this for my health. I die about this. And prepared to, like my ancestors, to wake you up. Let's read it again. I got you. You ain't paying attention. The Cathars believed that within every person existed a divine light, or spirit, most commonly known today as the soul, which was trapped in a world of temptation and corruption. As Gnostics, they believe in dualism, or that this world was created by a lesser deity, Yahweh, who proclaimed himself to be the one and only creator, much like Satan. The Cathars then put forth that Orthodox Christianity also believed in a false God, and that the Catholic Church was a corrupt abomination that was deeply influenced by the prison of earthly life's materialism. Spirit, the vital essence of humanity, was therefore trapped in a negative physical realm that was created by a false God and ruled over by his demoralized minions. To free yourself from this jail of the human condition, the Cathars believed you had to first become aware of the evil and depravity that existed in the reality of human life, which included the ecclesiastical, dogmatic, and social structures of that time. Once you were cognizant of the prison of matter, quote unquote, and its corruption, then you could set about breaking its bonds, which was a step-by-step progression that was different for each individual, becoming kinder, gentler, more spiritual, less materialistically oriented, and freeing oneself from addictions were just some of the ways to set the spirit free. The Cathars accepted the world as it was, and consequently learned to transcend it. They taught that in order to go beyond the earthly life, you had to experience it. You couldn't run away from the world, but if you genuinely experienced all it had to offer, both positive and negative, at the point you could throw off the shackles of addiction and attachments. Family, the trials and tribulations is a part of our mission. We go through hell, and I know because at the end of the day, we are souls trapped in this prison. We have to go through this trials and tribulation for that reason alone. But here's the beauty of it. If you can keep your head up through everything that you go through in life, if you can survive it, keep your head strong through everything you go through and survive, you already won in the afterlife. You already won now, but you must know this in order to graduate, in order to know that you are Christ and one with God. Did any of this what I'm saying have you heard in church? I didn't think so. Let's keep going. I'm going to read that again. The Cathars accepted the world as it was. They accepted the world as it was and consequently learned to transcend it. They taught that in order to go beyond the earthly life, you had to experience it. You couldn't run away from the world, but if you genuinely experienced all it had to offer, both positive and negative, at the point, you could throw off the shackles of addictions and attachments. In other words, all of the temptations of life, including the last vestiges of holding on to pain and loss, had to be extinguished before you begin to transcend. You got to give up. You got to throw everything you care about away. It's just what it is. All of the temptations of life, including the last vestiges of holding on to pain and loss, had to be extinguished before you could begin to transcend. When you were no longer bound to the world, then you could truly enjoy it. When you were no longer bound to the world, you can truly enjoy it. The Catholics believed in reincarnation, but never saw it as necessary or desirable process. It's not cool to come back here for what? Yeah, they believed it, they knew it was true, but they weren't pro-life. They didn't see it as desirable to come back and do this shit all over again. Just like the ancient Egyptians didn't feel that was cool or necessary. The Catholics believed in reincarnation, but never saw it as necessary or desirable process. Rather, they realized that some individuals wouldn't be able to free their souls from this earthly prison. Everybody can't go. Rather, they realized that some individuals wouldn't be able to free their souls from this earthly prison in only one lifetime. So they recognized that it might take some people more resistance to attain their freedom. This group also completely rejected the Old Testament. This group of early Christians also rejected completely the Old Testament and embraced the Gospel of John as their most sacred text. In it, Christ states, and I quote, "A new commandment I give unto you, that you love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and that you love your neighbor and yourself." Excuse me, let me say that again. I give unto you that you love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and that you love your neighbor as you love yourself, as yourself. Excuse me. With this one simple statement, the Cathars eschewed the rules, regulation, dogma, indulgences, and penances of the Catholic Church. To these Gnostics, loving God and one another was all that was necessary in the spiritual journey. They understood that simply living in this way would help set them free from this, and I quote, prison of life that we are all stuck in right now. Catholics believe that Jesus Christ was a pure manifestation of spirit who wasn't constrained by the limitations of matter, and that he was the messenger of the true God of love, which the faith embraced. They pointed out that the false God of the Old Testament demanded fearful obedience and worship from his children, quote unquote. And if he didn't get it, the results were often torment and murder. The dogma of the Trinity and sacrament of the Eucharist, and that's spelled Eucharist, were also rejected by the Cathars, as was purgatory, for they believed that life on earth was punishment enough. And can't we all agree? Members of this sect took their beliefs beyond the religious. Although most of them directly related to the jail of the human condition, for example, they believed that giving oaths was wrong because it only tied one more to the dominion of the world. This certainly flew in the face of medieval period, since most business transaction and allegiance to nobles and the like were carried out with oaths due to the legal of. Excuse me, let me read that again because I don't want to read too fast. You're missing the point. This certainly flew in the face of the medieval period, since most business transactions and allegiance to nobles and the like were carried out with oaths due to the level of illiteracy, the lack of reading and understanding and know how to read. Sexual abstinence was also preached by the Cathars, even in marriage, as they felt it freed them from slavery to the flesh. Perfecti were expected to practice complete celibacy. often leaving their spouses when they reach that level to lessen the temptation of, and I quote, senseless intercourse that continue to imprison those who practice it. And the destruction of life in any form also went against their beliefs. So perfecti wouldn't eat any creature except fish or any byproduct of animal reproduction, cheese, eggs, milk, butter, and the like. But interestingly enough, the perfecti didn't condemn any other followers for having sexual intercourse or eating foods tied to reproduction. They just required these choices of themselves and any who wanted to reach that stage. As I related before, the followers of the Cathars were freed of any more prohibition, although the perfecti certainly preached their beliefs. They lived more by the example of their own holiness, which endeared them to the masses. And while the perfecti lived ascetic lives lived ascetic lives with respect to food, clothing, and celibacy, they maintained an elegance in their simplicity. They wore simple cloaks and didn't have anything like hair shirts or beggar clothing. Everyone they met, regardless of station, was treated the same, from the poorest of serfs to the richest of nobles. And when compared to the Catholic monks and bishops, the Cathar perfecti seemed gentler, kinder, more pious, more honest, and much more moral. Not to mention that they led exemplary lives and they educated and helped the unfortunate. Consequently, people flocked to them in droves. With the good people making such inroads into converting Catholics, it was inevitable that something would eventually be done about them. Some say that it began with a political move by the King of France to capture the southern area to enlarge his kingdom, while others claim it was just the church exerting its power once again to suppress any preserved threat. Francine says it was a little bit of both. The church needed an army to fight its battle, which the French king provided, but only if the church allowed him to keep the conquered land. Much of this had been brewing for a long time, as the nobles of southern regions were quite adamant about not being taken over by France. And since medieval times were very political and the church had its fingers in almost everything, both the, both the Catholic leaders and the King of France were able to come to agreement. The growing influence of the Catholics ultimately led to several significant historical events. One, it sparked another crusade by the Catholic Church, this time with the goal of wiping out the Cathars from the face of the earth, called the Albigenese Crusade. The Albigensian Crusade. The ensuing violence was extreme even by medieval standards. Number two, the church got its mercenaries to offer conquered lands to the King of France and northern French nobles, which would eventually nearly double the size of that country. Number three, the church had a role in the creation of the Dominican order, which was founded, and I quote, to preach the gospel and combat heresy. And number four, the church created and institutionalized the truly horrible Inquisition, of which the Spanish is the most infamous. The church created the institutionalized the truly horrible inquisitions, of which the Spanish is mostly infamous for. Speaking of the inquisitions, millions of women were killed and tortured because they were thought to be witches. Speaking of the Inquisition, millions of women were killed and tortured because they were thought to be witches and working in the league with the devil. So when you hear me say Me Too, LGBTQ, you go so hard on everybody who has an opinion, their freedom of speech about how they feel in their opinions, but you guys are historians. I know you are. You gotta be to be that powerful like you are now. So you know how big of an effect that religion has on these women. How come you never spoke up upon religion? Why? Because it's old? No, because these are still going on today. So why not speak on this? Religion is still running shit when it ain't supposed to. It's still corrupt. So that's my question to Me Too and the LGBTQ. When are you guys going to address the issues that made it hard for women and homosexuals, all the other ones out there? Religion played a big part as well. So all I'm saying is be equal in who you banging on. No pun intended. Speaking on the Inquisition, millions of women were killed and tortured because they were thought to be witches and working in the league with the devil. Now, why didn't anyone realize that getting rid of all these women would cause the population to suffer? Y'all might hear some scripts or some and how I'm saying, but I'm going to read it slow, reread it so you can understand this. Because this is for scholars. This ain't for anybody to look at this and say, oh, he's talking crazy. What are you talking about? This is for my scholars. This is for y'all to go back and check me on this, challenge me on this, or confirm me on this. I'm going to read that again. Speaking of the Inquisition, millions of women were killed and tortured because they were thought to be witches and working, and I quote, working in league with the devil. Now, why didn't anyone realize that getting rid of all these women would cause the population to suffer? This isn't surprising, though since from its inception, the Catholic Church has always been patriarchal in nature. It demands celibacy from its priests so that they won't have to support families. Women aren't allowed to serve in the priesthood, and church dogma dictates that women be obedient to men. Me too. I don't never see y'all bang on religion. In 1198, Pope Innocent, true name, real name, no gimmicks. Real name, no gimmicks. His real name is Pope Innocent III. In 1198, Pope Innocent III came to power, determined to rid Languedoc of the Cathars. At first, he tried peaceful means, such as having his priests in the region try to convert the Gnostic group. But he met with little success. In 1204, he then suspended the authority of the bishops in southern France and appointed papal legates to oversee the situation. Again, there was little progress. So the Pope sought support from the nobles in the region and excommunicated those who didn't cooperate. Excommunicated. The powerful Count Raymond sixth of Toulouse refused to act against the Cathars and was excommunicated in 1207. People who were in Cathars who loved the work and spiritual divineness of these people were getting executed because they knew these people were genuinely true. The church killed them as well. After a heated argument between the count and a papal legate sometime in 1208, the papal legate mysteriously died. Upon hearing this, Pope Innocent issued a papal bull to start a crusade against the Albigenses. And for all my scholars, all my people who are interested, write down papal bull. Papalbull. Papal bull. This is the term they used to get rid of all the books that they didn't want to put in the Bible because these books were very powerful. Pope Innocent issued a papal bull to start a crusade against the Albigenese Cathars by offering the land of the heretics to anyone who would fight. Many in northern France took up the offer, and soon it was north against south. The fighting in the Albigenese crusade went very well for the Pope and the northern armies between 1209 and 1215. Then there was a series of revolts and reverses between 1216 and 1225, in which almost all the land seized were taken back. France King Louis VIII finally intervened in 1226. He proceeded to take charge and wipe out the last Cathars stronghold of Munster in 1244. About 15 years before that time, however, Pope Gregory IX instituted the first Inquisition to rid the area of heretics. The estimates of Cathars killed even before the formation of the Inquisition is close to 200,000. These are your ancestors. Christians. Call up your bishop. Bible school is almost soon. Do I have any religious scholars in here? The estimate of Cathars killed even before the formation of the Inquisition is close to 200,000. Yet it's unclear whether or not that number includes those who defended the group. For example, In July 1209, the papal legate Arnaud Armaury surrounded the town of Bizars, France, with his army and demanded that the Cathars be turned over to him. The town of nearly 20,000 refused, even though there were only about 500 Cathars hidden there. The town of nearly 20,000 refused to turn over to Cathars, even though there were only about 500 Cathars hidden there. When the legate was asked how to distinguish Cathars from the citizens of the town by another crusader, Arnaud Armaury is said to have answered, "Kill them all. God will know his own." We, the town of nearly 20,000 refused to turn over these innocent early Christians called the Cathars. When the legate was asked how to distinguish Cathars from the citizens of the town by another crusader, Arnaud Armaury is said to have answered, and I quote, "Kill them all. God will know his own." Somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people were slaughtered that day, most of whom weren't even Cathars. According to an eyewitness writer, Caesar of Hesterbach, then a ruthless course was started in 1233 as Cathars were burned wherever they were found and dead bodies were even exhumed for that purpose. Having taken religious vows against hurting or killing anyone, the perfecti had been unable to protect themselves. Can you imagine? And thank y'all for watching, because I know this is, but for the ones who know, they're going to stay watching. Can you imagine? You see plenty of movies out there. Can you imagine these innocent men, women, and children being killed, slaughtered, murdered, and probably even raped? And they're not even defending themselves because spiritually they were nonviolent. Then a ruthless course was started in 1233 as Cathars were burned wherever they were found and dead bodies were even exhumed for that purpose. Having taken religious vows against hurting or killing anyone, the perfecti had been unable to protect themselves, but throughout the crusade, thousands of people have risen to their defense, including many people of different faiths. After a 10-month siege in which 200 Catholic perfecti and 300 soldiers held off 10,000 crusaders, the church soldiers found a breach in the defenses and the good people could no longer be protected. Although the last known burning of a Catholic by the Inquisition wasn't until 1231, for all intents and purposes, the Cathars fell at their stronghold of Montsegur and were essentially wiped out. They were wiped out. While a few monks did manage to slip away with their treasure, the remaining perfecti gathered with their supporters and were marched down in front of the castle and put into a huge pyre, that's Pyre. It's said that while they were burning, they left their lives singing a hymn of praise to the true God of love. In any case, I'm sure that they found their kingdom not of this world, as Jesus always said. And right now we're going to put the focus back on Jesus. And thank y'all for watching this long. The interesting thing about religious secret society is that almost all of them were Gnostic in nature. That's because they had to be, not only because of the information they protected, but because it flew in the face of the establishment. Gnostics have tried throughout the centuries to rise up and give back the truth about a loving Father and Mother God. Along with Christ's survival and lineage. And each time they've been called heretics and ostracized, persecuted, and killed. Yet information is coming out fast and furious these days. I personally have no fewer than 50 books that confirm what I relate in these pages, much of which Francine reported decades ago. This isn't my ego speaking here, it's more to let you know that not everyone goes in trance or hears their guides, as I do. After reading my books that I know were infused by spirit, people by 1,000 have let me know that what you said for or wrote about rings true in my soul, or I always felt this way but couldn't express it, or if I did try to tell anyone, I worried that I'd be called crazy. Some of you are like that right now. Some of y'all have taken me on Messenger or whatnot, or in the stores, Hey man, I appreciate what you're doing. I didn't know everything, but I relate to it. Thank you. And so, with that being said, you're truly welcome. Well, I believe that the universal truth resides in every human being and resonates deeply. This especially applies to Jesus. His words were so simple and true that they began to feel as if they were etched upon our very souls. I always believed that Jesus was Gnostic because he was an Essene, which was one of the several systematic sects in the Judaic faith. The Essenes' primary base was Qumran, and that's Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. But in the book, The Templar Papers, compiled and edited by Otvar Oslin, there is a chapter written by Sandy Hamlet, the editor and publisher of the Journal of the Rennes Alchemists, that expounds on recent archaeological evidence that shows the Essenes lived on Jerusalem's Mount Zion at the time of Christ. You may wonder what the significance of this is. Well, Mount Zion was purportedly the location of the Last Supper, along with being the headquarters of the Knights Templar more than 1,000 years later. Further evidence comes from the discovery of the Essene Gate. You see, there were many gates to Jerusalem, all of which were named after directions to either areas in that city or places beyond the gates. For example, the Damascus or Damascus Gate led to the city of Damascus. That's Damascus. The archaeological discovery of the Essene Gate was made from the remains of an ancient wall that had once surrounded Mount Zion, and the Essenes were known to surround themselves with such barriers to keep out the general populace. In fact, Jesus was said to have moved freely in the walled-in community of these Gnostics. Archaeologist and Dominican priest Bargil Pixner also found the remains of ritual baths exactly like those found in Qumran, and the Essenes were noted for their rituals of cleanliness and purity. When Pixner presented his evidence to a noted Israeli archaeologist, he replied, "Here you have excellent proof that the Essenes lived in this quarter of Jerusalem." It's also interesting to note that in the early days, the Jewish Christians were accepted to the point that they were allowed to build a church in Jerusalem. Now, where do you think that the church was located? You guessed it, on Mount Zion, called the Church of the Apostles. It was erected on the same site that had been razed by the Romans in the First Jewish Revolt in AD 67 and 68, and where the Last Supper was held in the Essene Synagogue. Based on his research, famed archaeologist, Yigal Yadin, put forth a theory that Christ led a systematic inner set of Essenes. Now, it's known that John the Baptist was a prophetic leader, an Essene, and a cousin of Jesus. So did Jesus take over John's leadership after his death? Many think so. Let me read that again. Based on his research, famed archaeologist Yigal Yadin put forth a theory that Christ led a systematic, and that's spelled Schismatic, inner set of Essenes. Now, it's known that John the Baptist was a prophetic leader, an Essene, and a cousin of Jesus, so many think so. It's also known that John the Baptist sent some of his disciples to join Christ's group, one of whom was John the Beloved. From there, according to Sandy Hamlet, and that's Hamblet, we move into Gnostic theologian and the theologian of the Gospel of John. 1,000 or so years ago, later, the Knights Templar, who was often called Johannine Christians, or Johannine Christians, and the Knights of St. John came on the scene, and many theorized that they protected Christ's descendants. Thus, we have the whole mystery of Merovingian line, and that's Merovingia, the Merovingian line, and of these early Jewish Christian sects evolving into Gnostic Christians, such as the Cathars. Now, why would these so-called secrets that the Gnostics possessed induce such a flurry of hate, wars, and rebellion? Well, we have to look at how powerful the Catholic Church was in influence and wealth. If you didn't follow its dogmatic rules, you were told that you would go to hell. This type of attitude fostered the practice of indulgence that also augmented the coffers of the church, which was mainly people paying the church to absolve their dead or dying relatives of sin so that they stay out of hell. The church finally righted itself after the Reformation led by Martin Luther, and not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther. Look up Lutheranism and things like Martharism. These are old European historians. And after the formation of the Anglican Church in England gave it a big wake-up call. However, as Catholics and Protestants fought over who ruled the Western world's Christian population, both factions put Jesus on the back burner. Both faiths took on Paul's interpretation of Christ's life and teaching, turning him into the Son of God who was crucified and then resurrected. In no way could they accept that our Lord was married or had children, for in their minds that would keep him from being divine. And if Jesus didn't perish on the cross, there's no way to give guilt to all those who were told that, and I quote, he died for our sins, end quote. And there would be no premise of the resurrection. So this led to severe editing of the Bible, including expurgation of many gospels. Everything had to conform to the new Pauline view. I hope y'all are watching. Gnostics, on the other hand, revere Christ's teachings, but believed that he was just a messenger from God. They knew that he was married and had children, didn't die on the cross, had a human side, and couldn't be called God. They also believed in duality of a father and mother God, and put forth the concept that you could worship them anywhere and that their kingdom resided in your soul. This is the true teachings of Christ, guys. When the Cathars and the Knights Templars tried to promote these messages of truth, they were exterminated by the Christians. That's because such teachings only promise love, forgiveness, and solace to humankind without the fear of retribution. This, of course, keeps members out of church, and the big business of, and I quote, saving souls is negated. So to evade persecution, underground Gnostic groups began to form in the hopes of surviving long enough to let people know the real mission of Christ. The next secret that I'm about to relate may not necessarily seem to have anything to do with the theme of this book, but as you read on, you'll see how well it fits. And you know what? I think I'm just going to leave it there. Because you guys can pick up this book. Sylvia Brown, Secret Society, she goes in more about this. I'm going to keep on dropping them. I'm going to keep on dropping them. Wake up, family. If you're going to call yourself Christians, saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit, at least do yourself the due diligence and study your own shit. And just don't believe in God because my mom and papa believed in God or mom and dad believed in God. Find out who God is so you can worship the true God, the true supreme Father, the true mother and God, because yes, everything comes from the womb man. So why wouldn't you think that the demiurge from your Bible wouldn't come from a mother as well? And until you do your research and find the truth on who you are and that you are greater, think twice before you post these God posts and how much you love God. And I can't tell you what to do either, but at least, damn it, research your own shit. Okay? Class is in session. Darren's Corbin Mystery School. Stay tuned, because it's only going to get deeper and darker. I am Christ consciousness alive and well. I am the Son of the Mother God. Eyes wide open. Eyes wide open. Till next time.